A new bill moving through the state legislature could say that libraries would cut their costs, but publishers are saying this would also infringe on the rights of authors. Taylor Fleming joining us in the studio to break it down. Taylor.
Janice, today this bill was scheduled for a second debate and short reading in the House and added 3 co-sponsors. The Digital Library Protection Act would restrict publishers from making agreements to distribute electronic materials like audiobooks and ebooks if the agreement would keep the library from lending and operating normally. According to the executive director of the Peoria Public Library, Randall Yelverton, the prices for digital books and audiobooks are already high and rising. Yelverton says they buy these digital copies for prices more than consumers. And it's not like they get to keep these copies forever. There are a limited amount of times people can check them out before more copies are needed. If the law passed, he thinks they would be able to lend digital books the same way physical books are loaned out.
If we can't get these prices under control, we're not going to be able to function as libraries have functioned so long in their communities. We're going to be very limited in what we can purchase, and we won't have the broad array of materials.
On the other side of the issue, the American Association of Publishers is against the bill, telling 25 News it is fundamentally flawed. Their chief communications officer claims that this legislation would limit access to ebooks and audiobooks for readers at local libraries and infringe on the rights of authors and creators. The association filed a lawsuit against a similar law in Maryland that ended up being declared unconstitutional in 2022. According to Publishers Weekly, New York's governor saw that lawsuit and vetoed another similar law in her state. The current draft of the law says that if the bill is passed by the General Assembly, it would immediately go into effect. Any contract that would be prohibited under the legislation would become unenforceable and void. Janice, Tyler.